Under Trudeau, the average mortgage payment has more than doubled from a modest $1,400 a month on average when he took office to $3,200 a month today after 8 years of Trudeau. Is that his deficits are ballooning interest rates on our mortgage payments, and he's continuing to give money to the big city gatekeepers. Why? Big city gatekeepers prevent construction with red tape, delays, and development charges. Vancouver's municipal government adds $650,000 to the cost of every unit of housing. We had a deal. In Canada, if you work hard, you get a house. Trudeau's been in power for 8 years. He has to stop blaming Stephen Harper. Harper's been gone since 2015. The gatekeepers prevent immigrant doctors and nurses from working. Only 41% of immigrant doctors and 37% of immigrant nurses are allowed to practice. Poilievre government's going to change, work with the provinces to get to a merit-based system that says within 60 days of an immigrant applying to work in their profession, they should get a yes or no based on tested ability, not based on where they come from. Should be based on what they can do. Well, first of all, I just point out, if you're happy with the way things are going with drug overdoses right now, then vote Liberal or NDP. Their policies have been in place since 2016. Here's how I would do it. Ban cocaine, crack, and other hard drugs. Stop using tax money to buy narcotics. Get rid of the catch and release bail and keep violent criminals behind bars. Invest in treatment and make Big Pharma pay for it. 6 people dying every day in British Columbia. BC is a laboratory for this experiment of easy drugs and criminals on the loose. See, we have the biggest Punjabi expatriate community in the world. My team, which includes Tim Uppal, my deputy leader, are working with them to get a direct flight from Vancouver and Toronto directly to the state of Punjab.
Housing shortage is one thing which has been exacerbated over the last few years, and with people coming in huge numbers, that shortage doesn't seem to find a solution for itself. So what do you think the government needs to do? You say that the big city gatekeepers, they need to be fired. What can the federal government do when it seems like more of a municipal issue?
The opposite of everything Justin Trudeau has been doing. Under Trudeau, the average mortgage payment has more than doubled from a modest $1,400 a month on average when he took office to $3,200 a month today. The average down payment has more than doubled, and in Vancouver, it has tripled to over $200,000 that it's needed for a down payment after 8 years of Trudeau. And rent has doubled from about $950 a month on average to over $2,000, again, after 8 years of Justin Trudeau. The reasons that housing is among the most expensive here in Canada, anywhere in the world, after 8 years of Trudeau, is that his deficits are ballooning interest rates on our mortgage payments, and he's continuing to give money to the big city gatekeepers. So Canada has the fewest houses per capita of any country in the G7, even though we have the most land to build on. It makes no sense. We have way more land than all these other countries, and yet we have fewer houses per capita. Why? Big city gatekeepers prevent construction with red tape, delays, and development charges. Vancouver's municipal government adds $650,000 to the cost of every unit of housing. So that's $650,000, not to pay for labor, materials, or land. That is just to pay for bureaucracy and taxes. What's the solution? A Poilievre government will link the number of dollars that big cities get for infrastructure to the number of houses that get completed. Build more homes, get more infrastructure money. Block housing construction and lose infrastructure money. In other words, we'll fine the gatekeepers and give building bonuses to those that get things built. Bring home houses people can afford.
So is that not something that the municipal governments need to take care of in conjunction with maybe their provincial counterparts? Because a lot of these calculations around numbers, a lot of these calculations around how much gets added to the cost of every unit, like you say, $644,000 in Vancouver for every single unit?
Yes.
Every single unit of housing.
Every unit.
644,000
of government costs alone. I'll send you the sourcing for it. It's done by City Howe Research. Vancouver City Hall adds $644,000 to be precise, to every unit of housing. Bureaucrats and politicians pay a fine when they block housing construction. And I'm going to give big bonuses to those municipalities that get out of the way and let builders build.
It almost sometimes seems like, Mr. Poilievre, that when you talk about solving the problems that are the pressing issues of the day, that you are advocating for a massive overhaul for the structure with which the layers of government function. Is that what you're eventually looking to do, to overhaul that structure of governance where we've got certain responsibilities that rest within the realm of the municipalities, and some go into the provincial realm, and then there are others that go into the federal realm? So is there a wish or a dream to break those barriers so that you can bring in more efficiency?
We had a deal. In Canada, if you work hard, you get a house. Before Trudeau, it was affordable to buy a home. Anybody who had a decent job could afford a house. I'll give you an example. I came to Vancouver and I wanted to see the most outrageously priced house. So my staff went on MLS. They found this place for $5 million, a rotting little shack. So I went there to see it, tried to make sense of it. I called the realtor. I said, how are you charging $5 million for this? She says, don't worry. You can tear it down and build 6 units on it. I said, okay, wait a sec here. 6 units, $5 million. That's just for the land because it's a tear down. So that means $800,000 per unit just for the dirt. Then you have to spend another $300,000 on materials and labor. That brings you to $1.1 million. Another $200,000 for all the permitting per unit. So now you're up to $1.3 million per unit. Now, here's the thing. 50 years ago, a barber and a waitress could have got married and moved into that house. And now, a half a century later, their grandkids would not be able to afford 1/6 of what their grandparents saw. So in other words, the promise we had in this country that if you work hard, you get a house, the deal has been broken. And under Trudeau, it's gotten worse than ever. I'm prepared to stand up to the big city gatekeepers to clear the way, to build more homes so young people can put a roof over their heads.
One of the big reasons why we've got this housing shortage is also because the influx of new people who are coming in. And now the immigration targets that the federal government has are even more ambitious going forward. Over the next 3 years. Close to 1.5 million newcomers are going to be entering into the country. Now, when you talk to the government about people within the Liberal Party, they say, when you talk to them about these big numbers, that we need to bring in immigration, we need people for our workforce, aging population and all that. But then some of them also say that this is all because when the Conservatives were in power for 10 years, they did not foresee the demographic shift which we would have undergone, and they did not bring in as much immigration as we would have needed. So that's why we're now having to play catch up. What's your response to that, Mr. Poilievre?
Nonsense. First of all, Trudeau's been in power for 8 years. He has to stop blaming Stephen Harper. Harper's been gone since 2015. Give me a break. And by the way, when Harper was prime minister, the average house cost $450,000. It's more than doubled. The average mortgage payment was $1,400. It's now $3,200. The average down payment for a house was $22,000. It's more than double that now.
Incomes have not gone up in the same proportion.
They have not. So when Harper was around, housing was affordable. They have to stop blaming other people for the problems that Trudeau has created after 8 years. If after 8 years he can't get anything done and he still has to blame the previous government, then he'll never get anything done, and it's time to replace him with someone who can do it. Look, it's all well and good to bring in a higher immigration, but you have to have the houses. The only way to get the houses is to get the gatekeepers out of the way and build, baby, build. Build, baby, build. That's the solution. I will remove the gatekeepers and bring homes people can afford.
Do you think the healthcare funding and the funding for housing from the federal government should be tied to the number of immigrants a particular province ends up absorbing over the course of the year?
I would tie it to results. So, let's talk about healthcare for a second. Right now, we have a shortage of doctors and nurses, even though the gatekeepers prevent immigrant doctors and nurses from working. Only 41% of immigrant doctors and 37% of immigrant nurses are allowed to practice. So here we have, I'm sitting in the waiting room with my daughter for 6 hours while she has a migraine because there aren't enough doctors and nurses, and there are thousands of immigrants who are shut out of those professions. Meanwhile, we have Canadians who are born here, go study medicine abroad, come back, and get shut out of the system. So a Poilievre government's going to change, work with the provinces to get to a merit-based system that says within 60 days of an immigrant applying to work in their profession, they should get a yes or no based on tested ability, not based on where they come from. Should be based on what they can do, right? And so we need to have a common testing standard across the country that immigrants can challenge. If they meet the standard, they should immediately be licensed to practice in our hospitals and in other professions. We have this in the trades already. It's called the Red Seal. If you can write your Red Seal, it doesn't matter where you come from. You get to be an electrician or a carpenter. Let's do the same thing in the professions. And I want a country, it doesn't matter where you're coming from, it matters where you're going, it doesn't matter who you knew, it matters what you can do. That's the country my wife came to as an immigrant, and it's the country I want for our kids.
Mr. Poilievre, I also want to talk to you about the Chinese interference, all the reports that leaked out of CSIS. And now we've also got this report about the interference was not just limited to the 2019 and 2021 federal election, but maybe also the municipal election last year in Vancouver. The provincial premier in BC has also asked CSIS for a briefing about this whole interference situation. A special rapporteur has been appointed by Mr. Trudeau, David Johnstone, the former Governor General. What's your response to the whole strategy with the way this whole thing is being handled by the government?
Well, it's a cover-up by Trudeau. He's known about this foreign interference since 2017. That's not my opinion. It's the documented fact from leaked CSIS documents. Briefing notes show that he knew back in 2017 that a hostile foreign communist dictatorship was interfering in our elections to help him win. We know now that Beijing specifically said it wanted Trudeau to stay as prime minister. Why does a communist dictatorship want Trudeau as our prime minister? That's not my opinion. That's right in the briefing notes from CSIS that he has received. And yet, over the last 6 years that he's known about it, what has he done? Did he tell the public? Did he go out and hold a press conference and said, everyone, I have some terrible news? I know that there's been foreign interference in our elections. No, he kept it secret. This is a guy whose family foundation, the Trudeau Foundation, got $200,000 from Beijing. This is a guy who's been helped in two successive elections by a foreign dictatorship. If he wanted to put our country first, he would have called a public inquiry to get to the bottom of it, put in place a foreign influence registry to expose anyone who's doing paid work to manipulate our democracy, and strengthen our espionage laws to take back control of our country. And that's what we need to do, bring home our democracy by putting an end to foreign interference.
The appointment of former Governor General David Johnston as the special rapporteur, what's your response to that?
He's a family friend of Justin Trudeau's, a cottage neighbor of Justin Trudeau's, and he's a former member of the Trudeau Foundation, which got money from Communist China. Obviously, we can't go with that. We need to have a public inquiry to get to the bottom of it. We need someone independent who's not a family friend of Justin Trudeau and not a member of the Trudeau Foundation.
When the Liberals say that if there is a public inquiry into this, there would be such sensitive information which would go out. Even in the committee hearings, one of the Liberal members said that somebody who is really interested in finding out when we found out what we did, how we did it, would be China. So if we did a public inquiry, all of that information, China would get access to all of it. So what do you think? How much of a reasonability do you see in that statement?
Well, it's very simple. Courtrooms deal with issues of national security all the time when people are charged in organized crime cases, espionage cases. And what the judge does is simply brings the hearings into private when there's sensitive material so that it doesn't go before the public eye. And then that judge can still make a ruling based on the evidence that he or she has learned. So courtrooms do this all the time. This is not hard. It can be done. It should be done. It's nothing but an excuse to cover up that Justin Trudeau benefited from foreign interference, and he doesn't want people to know what he knew.
Mr. Poilievre, I also want to talk to you about the overdose crisis.
Yes.
As much as it's unfortunately prevalent in other parts of the country,
Yes.
British Columbia has lost over 11,000 people since 2016.
Yes.
There are clear lines drawn in your approach of how you would like to deal with this and how the federal government currently wants to deal with this. Even at the provincial level in British Columbia, the whole approach is about maintaining and providing safe supply. What is your stance? And you and I have talked about this before, but once again, now that you're in BC, you've seen once again, yet again, how this problem is impacting the various facets of our lives, be it the healthcare sector that's overburdened by people who are getting overdosed. What do you think needs to be done? And you've said this before, and it's almost like going to be a repeat of what you've always said. But just for the record, once again, what is it that you think needs to get done to overcome this menace of drug overdose?
Well, first of all, I just point out, if you're happy with the way things are going with drug overdoses right now, then vote Liberal or NDP. Their policies have been in place since 2016, provincially and federally, and we've seen the results. A 300% increase in overdose deaths, massive crime, permanent tent encampments, people lying face first on the pavement on Hastings Street, 6 people dying every single day in British Columbia. That is the result of 8 years of Trudeau and the provincial NDP. What they've done is flooded our streets with easy drugs, taxpayer-funded narcotics, and a catch and release bail law that allows repeat violent offenders to go free the same day they're arrested. So if you like all that, then vote NDP or Liberal. If you believe in a common sense approach to bring home safe streets, you have to choose the conservative approach. Here's how I would do it. 1, I would ban heroin, crack, cocaine, illicit fentanyl, and other hard drugs that Trudeau and the NDP are decriminalizing. 2, I would stop giving out taxpayer-funded narcotics. What we see is happening is the addict is taking those narcotics, ripping off the label, selling them to kids, using the profits to buy more dangerous fentanyl. I would end that. 3, I'd put all of our resources into recovery and treatment, like they're doing in Alberta. They've doubled the number of treatment beds from 4,000 to 8,000. They take the people off the streets, give them detox, counseling, life skills, a plan to break free from drugs, and then they bring them home drug-free. And finally, we have to make the corrupt big pharma companies pay the price. They're the ones that flooded North America with OxyContin and other dangerous opioids. They lied to regulators, doctors, nurses, and other healthcare professionals to bring these drugs. They said that they were non-addictive and non-lethal, and they made billions of dollars off of those lies. I met a nurse who was in the system. She had a sore back, took OxyContin, got addicted. She ended up losing her child, her home, and living on the street, but it was only through recovery and treatment that she got out of it. So I would do what we did against the tobacco companies in the 90s. Sue them. Sue the dirtbag big pharma companies to extract billions of dollars and put that money into recovery and treatment. To summarize, ban cocaine, crack, and other hard drugs. Stop using tax money to buy narcotics. Get rid of the catch and release bail and keep violent criminals behind bars. Invest in treatment and make big pharma pay for it.
What's your response to those who say that this is not the right approach and this is only going to further increase and enhance this kind of activity in the country, that banning is not the solution, that we have to approach it in a different manner?
Look at what that different manner is done in BC. In BC, we have decriminalization of heroin, crack, and other hard drugs. We have taxpayer-funded narcotics, and we've had it under Justin Trudeau for the last 8 years. What has happened? What is the result? 300% increase in overdose deaths, 6 people dying every day in British Columbia. BC is a laboratory for this experiment of easy drugs and criminals on the loose, and it has been an absolute nightmare. Parts of Vancouver are being turned into war zones. I got off the plane in Nanaimo the other day. What did I find out? A man came up to me, showed me his phone, the surveillance picture from his backyard at 2 a.m. A few days earlier with meth addicts in his backyard brandishing knives. Then I found out that a local mechanic had his tools stolen. He went to get his tools back. he got shot. Then I pick up the Nanaimo newspaper and they show that overdoses have actually doubled in the last year in Nanaimo, even as COVID moves farther and further into the background. This liberal NDP approach to turn drugs and criminals loose on our street is deadly, dangerous, and must be stopped. And only the common sense conservative approach of banning the drugs, putting the repeat violent offenders behind bars, getting people into treatment and recovery, and making big pharma pay, that is the common sense solution to bring home our brothers and sisters drug-free.
Mr. Poilievre, last question, and this is something of great interest to our listeners. The direct flight connection between Vancouver and Amritsar in Punjab. There is a huge number of listeners who travel to India on a regular basis, sometimes multiple times in the year. And that particular flight path is somehow not getting the necessary approvals that it needs. And we were talking about this off air, and you've mentioned that you've had conversations around that. What can you share with our listeners about it?
Well, first of all, Justin Trudeau has failed. He's had 8 years to get this direct flight, and he hasn't done it. His minister just signed an open skies agreement with India that didn't include the state of Punjab. So no direct flights from Canada to the state of Punjab. It's outrageous. So the Indian government is okay with direct flights. They're allowing them from Singapore, Malaysia, United Kingdom, Uzbekistan. Uzbekistan has a direct flight, and we don't. Qatar has a direct flight. Crazy. We have the biggest Punjabi expatriate community in the world. So there's a business case for this. So I've met with Air India, with the High Commissioner, and they've all confirmed they're open to it. And that's why my team, which includes Tim Uppel, my deputy leader, are working with them to get a direct flight from Vancouver and Toronto directly to the state of Punjab to save 10 or 11 hours for our Punjabi community. This will mean more tourism, both to Canada and to Punjab, which will be good for business, for the people traveling, for the airlines. It's a win-win-win, and I'm going to keep fighting tooth and nail until we get that direct flight.